Good morning, everybody. Great show coming your way today on GoJo and Golic. Our long national nightmare is finally over. CeeDee Lamb got paid, baby. We will jump into the contract details. Plus, Deion Sanders moving on to banning reporters. We're going to talk more about why he doesn't want anybody calling him anything, I guess. So we'll get into that. Plus, put up or shut up. Which college football teams have a lot to prove this season? The guys are in studio. We're going to have a blast. Let's do a show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here, all out in the DraftKings studio in Boston for these couple of days. We had a great show for everybody. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. We got a couple of good guests stopping by today. Ashley Bastock from the Cleveland.com. Going to get us up to date on this Cleveland Browns roster as we head into a season with still questions about the quarterback position, a Super Bowl ready roster, who is getting ready to face the Dallas Cowboys, Dad. David Helman from Fox Sports will join us later on to talk about that, the Jerry Jones whisperer. But Jesse mentioned it. Our national nightmare is over. The team that the Cleveland Browns will face in Week 1 is going to have their star wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb, on the field with a brand new, shiny deal. They're going to be whole, and he is going to be rich, Dad. He signs a 4-year, $136 million deal that makes him now the second highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history behind Justin Jefferson. The deal includes $100 million guaranteed, a $38 million signing bonus, the most ever given to a wide receiver. So, Dad, after all of the wailing and gnashing of teeth, how do you feel seeing the deal that he ultimately signed?
First, I want to say, because you and I were both in this position, while we talk about guy not in this position, a CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I want to be clear. No. I have never been in the position to be paid $100 million.
That.
That's my fault.
Okay.
That's my fault.
Thank you.
In this position, today is cut down day. Today, a lot of guys are losing their jobs.
Yeah.
And so, I as a 10th rounder, you as an undrafted free agent, you feel for the back half of the roster when you're trying to live out your dream. And for a lot of guys, it's over. So I just want to keep that in mind. I'll have a story about that later. But I mean, listen, this was inevitable. It was just a matter of when. There's still 2 weeks now, or a little under 2 weeks before the first game. Now I was part of the first true free agent class of 1993.
Yeah, I was going to say, people forget NFL did not always have free agency. That was not a thing until that year when you and Reggie White, most notably one of the
late great Reggie White had his name was leading the charge to get free agency. We actually had 11 free agents that first year with the Eagles, and Norman Brayman, the owner, who was more concerned about the bottom line than the team, didn't re-sign one of them. And the biggest one being Reggie White, who went to Green Bay on an $18 million deal. Think about that. What Reggie would be worth today, and Reggie signed, I think it was like a 5 or 6 year deal, I think, but I believe it was for $18 million. I signed with the Miami Dolphins, and I got a $50,000 signing bonus, as opposed to CeeDee Lamb's $38 million signing bonus. I got a $50,000 signing bonus, and they asked who I wanted the check made out. I had it made out to your mom.
So something's happening.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So that was where the money was going anyway.
That's
yeah. But and I was like all geeked up, making $750,000 a year for a 2-year deal, of which I made it through one before I got cut, and it was the end of my career, and a $50,000 signing bonus. And in no way I'm saying this as jealousy toward players today. I'm happy they're making their money, but it just goes to show that was the start of free agency, 1993, and some of the numbers that went around for, again, Reggie White, who headlined that group.
I would say Reggie White, $18 million for the entirety of that contract.
Yeah.
Chris Jones, for his most recent 5-year extension signed this last year, received a $30 million signing bonus up front on a 5-year, $158 million deal. So, how the times have changed.
Great for the players.
It's awesome for the players. And for CeeDee Lamb, Dad, this is a deal that, remember, the last bit of reporting that we had heard from Jeremy Fowler at ESPN, from Tom Pelissaro at the NFL Network, he was not pushing to be the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL.
Right.
Now, again, I mentioned the $38 million signing bonus. How this usually ends up working is during the course of negotiation, you want to find some win if you're the person representing the player or something where you can say, I am the highest blank. Whether that's the highest paid in terms of the average dollars per year, whether it's the highest total guaranteed money, or in this case, the highest signing bonus. You give your client something to show them the love of, oh, look what you've accomplished. This is the press release that we put out, even knowing, hey, this deal was probably always going to slot below. Dave Helman, who's coming on with us later, back in the spring when the Justin Jefferson deal got signed, or whenever that was this offseason, basically tweeted the day after the exact contract that CeeDee Lamb ended up getting. This was not hard to see coming, and yet for the Dallas Cowboys, Dad, it felt like it once again, like all their other deals, had to be hard to finally get to here. Now, I know they're technically no worse for the wear in getting CeeDee back. Now they've got time before the season.
They do have time, It feels unnecessary.
Yes.
I think that's the word. It feels
unnecessarily antagonistic towards players you know are going to be here and that you know you need.
Yeah, Jerry Jones's comments of letting the leaves fall, more leaves fall. There were 11 wide receivers that signed in the offseason, and CeeDee was the 11th.
Yeah.
And he had said he didn't expect to be the highest paid, and he was under. Now there are reports that Jamar Chase wants $140 million, which is what Justin Jefferson got, but Jamar Chase back at practice now and doesn't look like he's going to miss any time. We'll see where that goes. I don't think he should be the highest paid. I think it should be Justin Jefferson. But you're talking about minuscule. You're talking about wins for an agent and a player.
Well, and I think we're also talking from that vantage point about how we view the wide receiver landscape, where we all say, well, if we're organizing pay by how good you are as a player, we all believe Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the NFL right now, for the most part. And then it's CeeDee Lamb having that conversation with Jamar Chase and a couple of other guys, Tyreek Hill probably in that category as well. But, Dad, remember, that's not how it works. Like, if these guys really wanted to draw the line in the sand and say, I, CeeDee Lamb, deserve to be the highest paid guy in the league because I'm up next, or I, now in this case, Jamar Chase, they're good enough players. Like, this isn't like the quarterback market where you got to be top 12 to get a market-setting deal. These guys are legitimately top 3 at their position.
They are.
And so if they wanted to look at the market and say, yeah, I deserve to be paid like that, and so I wouldn't be able to fault them for it, even if we organize receivers in the way we rank them differently.
Right. So this is a deal that finally got done. Again, seems unnecessary that it took this long to get done.
Yeah.
Same with Dak. They have basically 2 weeks before week 1 to sign Dak to get him to a deal. And Dak seems like the guy that would sign the deal, right? Where there are those that are like, Dak, why sign it, man? You'd be a unrestricted free agent because they can't tag him. But, you run the risk of getting hurt, even though I still think he got money, and he was hurt off the last deal he got when he hurt his ankle.
Yes, the ankle
so he had gotten money. But I think he's kind of that team guy who would sign what would be, I would imagine, the richest deal. I would imagine he would pass Trevor Lawrence of the 275. So Dak would be the next highest paid quarterback in the league. But it just, I don't understand Jerry's mentality with this. But CeeDee Lamb does have the time. He didn't get the practice against other teams. He probably wouldn't have played in preseason games anyway. But he didn't get to practice full speed against other teams, and he's been working out, and he does have 2 weeks to get ready. So I worry less about the soft tissue injury when you're getting into the start of the season, like the possibility of a Trent Williams. When we get into that, talking about missing time, because that dude is not afraid to miss some time.
No.
He missed some time in Washington. You cannot talk him out of anything.
Well, I guess that's what this always comes down to is for Dak Prescott. I mean, he's not going to miss time even if he decides to go to go out and take them to the mat on what's going to happen here. And that'll be the interesting thing to talk to Dave about, because Dave Helman spent a bunch of time down in Dallas covering this team about Dak Prescott and his makeup, because you have got to kind of want to be a guy that pushes things forward.
Yeah.
And I kind of get the inkling that Dak is a guy who is mindful of, hey, this could change things for not only me, but for the rest of players. And we've talked about this with other guys, but that's a hard thing to ask of guys, Dad, for the reasons that you mentioned. This is a violent league where injury is almost, over a long period of time, a 100% certainty in some way, shape, or form. And when you're presented with $250+ million the way all these quarterbacks at the top of their game are now, that's a hard thing to turn down just in the name of setting a new precedent or being the guy that goes out there and leads the charge for everyone. When normal humans, like we joked off top, neither of us have been in a position to sign that. If you put $255.5 million ahead of me and said, hey, you're just narrowly going to edge out the other guy. We're not going to give you $60 million every year. We'll give you $55.5 million every year and be on your merry way. Most of the rest of us would look at that and go, all right, you know what? It's taken care of now.
Yeah.
Now I don't have to go into this season feel like I'm playing for my future. I can go out there and do that because not everyone wants to or is built to do that. And so if Dak does decide to make that undertaking, it's a pretty incredible thing to go and push your chips in the table the way we've seen a Kirk Cousins in the past do in those instances. Yeah. There's a reason it's as rare as it is for players like this to hit the open market.
Yeah. No, that's the truth. And I think we also don't live in this world of big money, having a big contract, Dak coming off a big contract where you would want to beat that number by a certain amount. We would be ecstatic. I mean, offer us a deal like that, we would be ecstatic. But these guys live in that world of big money.
Yeah.
So, they're going to want to be the next. And you're right about the meritocracy of the wide receiver. It does seem to be leveled off in a position of top going on down, where the quarterback, it's just the timing.
Yeah.
It's just the timing of it, because right now Trevor Lawrence is tied with Joe Burrow as the highest paid, and no one's going to say either one of those guys is the best quarterback in the league.
No, and we'll get to Mike Sando's QB Tiers article came out later on. There's a big discrepancy in the way those two quarterbacks are viewed around the league, but you're right. That money has come out for both of them. It's come out for CeeDee Lamb now, and we know we're waiting for Jamar Chase still.
Right.
We're waiting for the fallout of Brandon Ayuk and what happened in that situation. The Jets and Hassan Reddick, there's still no issue there. And Trent Williams came out the other day, and we saw the reports, I believe it was from Jeremy Fowler at ESPN, basically saying, yeah, he's not coming back until this gets reworked. My favorite part of that was the report that he has taken up golf during this time now as he get repaired. But Dad, you brought up his time in Washington. And now with that situation, for people that don't remember, there was a belief inside of his camp that there was a medical issue that Trent Williams had dealt with the tumor in his brain.
His head, yeah.
That, all of these things they had dealt with and he believed poorly. He sat out the entire year until the trade deadline leading up to that, just because you need a certain number of games to have that year count towards your vested total at the end. But he lost $7 million sitting out almost 3/4 of the season. So you want to talk about someone who's not afraid after making almost $150 million in his career to light a little bit on fire in the name of principle. Trent ain't the guy to mess with. So if you're the 49ers, that's the one that takes priority in my mind.
Yeah, I agree, because he's getting fined now. It's not obviously he's 36. It's not off his rookie deal, so the fine numbers stick. He's losing the money where he is not showing up, but he's a guy that doesn't care. He was a guy in Washington that the coaches would wait to see how he was dressed coming out for practice, even when they were in full pads. If he put on tennis shoes, and they were like, okay, he's not practicing today. And they let it happen because it was Trent Williams, and he was as good as he is. So you're not going to talk him into anything. You're not going to pressure him into anything. And you're right, he did the thing of waiting just up till the trade deadline so the year would count for him. So he's not a guy like Ayuk is going to play. They said Ayuk's not going to mess with the $14 million. CeeDee Lamb was going to make $18 million, but he obviously has the new deal. Trent Williams, man, doesn't seem that he cares.
I was going to say, and those guys are different points in their career. Brandon Ayuk hasn't made it to that second contract kind of money that Trent has, and hasn't proven it. Like, maybe those guys are capable of it. We don't know with them. We know with Trent Williams that he is absolutely capable of making this deeply uncomfortable for a team that needs him an awful lot for that group up front. So, fascinating things still hanging in the balance for that team. Again, coming up in the next segment, we'll talk to Browns reporter Ashley Bastock from Cleveland.com, one of the teams that that was linked to Brandon Ayuk,
Right.
at least for some time, the potential for Amari Cooper to be in that trade package there. But Jesse, I want to get to one of the other big money quarterbacks in the NFL we've talked a lot about lately. Tua Tagovailoa got up and got to speak to the media yesterday and got asked a little bit about that whole Brian Flores situation that we just heard about.
Oh, that whole thing? Yeah, no, that's not going to stay in the media for months to come. We'll just keep hearing about that. So Tua got up and he said something, we'll hear the sound, but he basically said no matter what the offensive line looks like, he can get the ball out fast. Listen to this.
Have you heard from Brian Flores in the last week?
I haven't heard from him.
Did you see his comments publicly?
I haven't seen his comments publicly.
Is there anything more that you'd like to add in the conversation to that?
There's nothing more I'd like to add to that.
What's your confidence level on the offensive line in front of you, specifically the interior of the line blocking for you?
Well, brother, I get the ball out fast, so I'm confident with anybody we got up there. I'll tell you that. I'm confident with anybody we get out there. So.
Okay, two things. First of all, he hasn't seen his comments publicly. Like, come on, man. We know you have. Don't say you haven't.
The lie
we know
detector
you have.
test has determined that's a lie.
And then, second of all, was this accidentally, the O-line catching some strays from Tua here? What do you think?
Dan, I didn't understand this yesterday from Tua Tagovailoa, and I wanted to hear the audio because I first saw this in print from Marcel Louis-Jacques, who does a great job covering that team for ESPN. And my first reaction, it sort of wrinkled my nose a little bit because this is the quarterback we just got done having an extended conversation after the interview he did with the folks at the Levitard show about the importance of belief in a player and what that can do for someone in terms of their production. Tua saying, hey, the former coach didn't believe in me, the new coach in Mike McDaniels does, and it's made all the difference for me. And yet in this moment, and I know Tua in the past has defended his offensive line.
Yes, he has.
Tua in the past has supported those guys, has supported other people on his team. But in this moment was given a layup to go out and basically say, hey, do you believe in your offensive line up front? And in a moment where he could have very easily, we see this all the time, you give a player an opportunity to talk about their teammates. It's something that guys love. It's usually where you get the best answers out of guys.
Absolutely.
Most players are wired to not want to talk about themselves and would just rather talk about their teammates. And so you throw a layup answer for a position group that I understand, if we're all analyzing it, is the focus of the Miami Dolphins team in terms of will they do enough to protect Tua? But if you're Tua, you're not one of us as a pundit. Those are your teammates. Those are the guys that you're relying on. So I was a little stunned. I'm not saying Tua's a bad guy, but I'm saying I didn't like the way these comments hit for a guy that just came off again talking about the importance of belief in others and what that instilled in him to not go out here and love up his guys, but instead, when given an opportunity to love up and pump up his offensive line, instead chose to make comments about him that come off sounding like a slight towards those guys.
Yeah, he should have left out the first line that I get the ball out quick and just said, I have all the confidence in the world in no matter who they put up in front of me. But he led off with, I get the ball out quick, so basically it doesn't matter who's in front of me. So I agree. I don't know if he meant it as a slight, but that's the way it came off as a slight because he then said twice, I have all the confidence in the world in guys in front of me, but he let it off by saying, oh, but because I get rid of the ball.
And the insinuation when I get the ball out quick is it really doesn't matter as much.
No.
Like, and I know you mean it. I'm saying for everyone else, I'll translate that into O-lineese. That's what it means. We all understand that. It just, and again, Dolphins fans all yesterday saying, don't make this bigger than it is. I'm not saying this is something that's going to undermine the team. All I'm saying is when the shoe is on the other foot, everyone gets upset about this stuff. If it was remember when Tyreek Hill was coming over here? And before he had ever caught a pass from Tua Tagovailoa, he lit the internet on fire by going out and saying, Tua's the most accurate quarterback I've ever played with.
And who did you just play with?
Patrick freaking Mahomes.
Yeah.
So Tyreek Hill decided to come over and say it before anyone else necessarily believed it about Tua Tagovailoa in those ways. And we all lauded it, saying, hey, he's going out there and trying to pump up his teammates. So, again, maybe there are larger comments I've missed where Tua went and waxed poetic about those guys. I've seen him do it in the past. I was just a little perplexed as to why in this moment he chose to respond the way he did, especially considering what we just went through.
Yeah, I agree. He chose to talk about himself. Instead of he brought up the O-line, but after he talked about himself. And I'm with you. I don't know how much of a big deal to make about us. I'm sure he'll get asked about it again.
And he might not, Dad. Like, I'm not saying this is a thing that even affects his season because he's right. He gets the ball out fast. And so it makes the job of the offensive line in front of him easier. But there was a much better way to phrase this that was much more complimentary to his teammates.
Yeah, leave yourself out of it.
Right.
Leave. Don't talk about yourself. Talk about the O-line that you had, just what you said. I have all the confidence in the world in who's ever in front of me, but leave out that first line about how I get rid of the ball quick.
Yeah, there are going to be plenty of people that spend their time breaking down, criticizing, and dissecting his offensive line. I don't think they need another one from inside that locker room, but that's just me. So that's one quarterback and O-line situation people are going to be paying attention to. Coming up next, one with a big circle around it in Cleveland. Deshaun Watson in a pivotal year for him and this team. We'll go out to Cleveland next. Welcome back to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. We talked about CeeDee Lamb, the Dallas Cowboys star pass catcher, getting the contract he deserves. That is of particular note for the team that's getting ready to face him in Week 1 in the Cleveland Browns. So for more on that, we're going to head out to Cleveland right now and talk to Ashley Bastock, Cleveland.com Browns reporter, kind enough to join us now. Ashley, good morning. How you doing?
Good morning. Great. Can't believe training camp is over already. It just flew by.
It is wild to believe we are at cut down day. By 4 o'clock Eastern, we'll have at least the initial view of what these Week 1 rosters are going to look like for teams. And Ashley wanted to start with one bit of big news that we certainly got the other day about what the Browns' immediate roster will look like now. Star running back Nick Chubb sent to the PUP list to start the season, so not going to be eligible for that first 4 weeks of the season. How much was this expected in terms of the plan for him in returning from injury after last season?
This was absolutely expected at this point. I mean, you look at the initial move they made with Nick when training camp started, which was putting him on active PUP. And really, they did that in case, hey, we all know at this point, right? Nick Chubb might be superhuman in many aspects of his training. So they did that in case he would be ready to practice. And if that had come, they would have been prepared to be able to activate him really quickly, get him to pass that physical, and get him out there. But as camp kind of wore on here, I think it just was trending this way. This was something we all expected. The second day of training camp, we watched him running sprints, and it quite honestly was unbelievable as he ran sprints down at the Greenbrier the second day of training camp there. But Jimmy Haslam, the owner, kind of pumped the brakes a little bit. Andrew Berry, the GM, kind of pumped the brakes a little bit. And I think these guys wanted to really make sure that they were giving Nick all the time he needed before they sent him out there. So really not surprising at all.
And people need to remember he had 2 surgeries after blowing out his knee in week 2. He had a meniscus and MCL surgery almost right away, and then not till November had the ACL surgery. So he really, really damaged that knee. And I guess, Ashley, is 4 weeks on the PUP list, do we believe that's going to be enough?
You know, I think it's an interesting question. I've kind of been saying too, there are a few things to remember with Nick, right? It's not just that he had 2 separate surgeries on this knee. It's that this is the second major reconstruction he's had on that knee. He also had one in Georgia back in 2015 or so. And obviously he bounced back wonderfully from that to finish out his college career. But, you know, I think it's interesting with these knees and with the position, it's kind of hard to gauge. I mean, I think in a perfect world, as long as he's back by sometime in November, I think that's plenty of time for him to get going, to ramp up. But I think the other nice thing is, even when he does and the team thinks he's ready to come back, I think they feel really confident that the guys they have around him can pick up a bunch of the load. I think they're ready to rely on Jerome Ford quite a bit, especially here at the beginning. They have Deontay Foreman, who just suffered a rib injury, but it sounds like he's going to be okay, kind of filling in that Kareem Hunt role too. And I know they also really like using Jerome as a third down back. So I think there's some leeway here. I wouldn't be surprised to see him out there sometime in October, November, but I also just think that everyone's going to be very cautious with how they're handling him and using him once he is back.
So that obviously a big story and a guy that's been the heartbeat of this offense. But Ashley, we know everyone's expecting this year, hey, Deshaun Watson needs to take that step forward, not only being available, but also producing in the ways they paid him to when they first brought him over here. What was camp like for Deshaun Watson, the shoulder injury, and the play that we've seen on the field so far?
You know, I think coming into this training camp, my biggest question was going to be, are we going to see any setbacks from Deshaun? And this specific injury he had, fracturing the bone in his shoulder socket, the glenoid bone, we have not been able to find a comp for that as far as quarterbacks go. I don't think there's many football players, period, that have suffered that. The closest comp the Browns were able to find was among baseball players. So I think it was promising in that he didn't really face those setbacks. I came out of the spring thinking he looked better than I thought he would. He was throwing every other day. They were being really cautious. I think now my biggest concern is that this pass catching core hasn't had a ton of time together. Of course, Jerry Jeudy is new. He was dealing with a knee injury for a long period of training camp. He really just kind of got back out there. Elijah Moore had to miss some time. You know, thankfully they got Amari Cooper and that holdout situation worked out right as camp started. But I do think his chemistry with these pass catchers, knowing they're going to be running a lot of these choice routes, is going to be key. And the reality is with injuries, I do kind of question how much time they've had. And I think that's something that they're really going to have to work to overcome in these early weeks.
I mean, we keep talking about injuries with Deshaun. He's been out 6 games the last year and 6 games the year before, right around 60% completion, almost as many interceptions as touchdowns. Forgetting the injury, is there a fear that he is not going to regain the form he had in Houston as one of the top quarterbacks?
You know, I don't think among the Browns, they've been his biggest supporters through all of this. And anytime we ask questions along those lines, everyone from Kevin Stefanski to Andrew Berry to Ken Dorsey to receivers kind of all just say the same thing, that they are 100% confident in that. And I think so much is placed on what he did in that second Baltimore game last year and in that fourth quarter when he went 14 of 14. I mean, it was a really impressive performance, and he did that with his shoulder fractured and playing on a high ankle sprain. You guys know how painful those can be. So I think right now there's all the confidence in the world coming out of Berea that he is going to be able to be that guy again.
It seems like we've been running down injury news in this segment, but I'm going to go throw one more. Greg Newsome headlined a group of players that came off the injury list yesterday and are now going to be available for the Browns. What's the confidence level around this defense coming off the stellar campaign they had in 2023, getting some pieces like him back in that unit?
Yeah, I think it's really high. Again, I think yesterday kind of underscores how cautious the Browns have been with injuries. A guy like Greg, maybe even a guy like Jack Conklin, they maybe could have practiced or been practicing for a week or a couple weeks, but really they just want to make sure these are veterans at this point. They feel confident in knowing what they can do. And this defense, it's the same. I mean, up front, they're essentially running it back. You have Myles Garrett coming off his Defensive Player of the Year season. I think everyone expects more of Myles, particularly in his sack production. And they're really excited for a guy like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in that linebacking core. And they believe they have one of the best secondary in football. Greg Newsome, a huge part of that. Obviously, Denzel Ward and Martin Emerson Jr. entering year 3. And I say I've spent a lot of my time, devoted a lot of my time to 2 joint practices with the Vikings. I only watch this defense, and they are just so aggressive, so impressive. I mean, it really is remarkable what Jim Schwartz has done with this unit in under 2 years still.
A little less than a minute to go, Ashley. Jerry Jeudy, first-round pick of Denver in 2020, did not pan out there, trying to resurrect his career with Cleveland. How is he looking inserted in that offense?
You know, I think that Jerry Jeudy and Deshaun Watson have just kind of shown in practice some natural chemistry. And I think a big part of that is the Browns went out and got Jerry Jeudy. They've liked him since 2020. I would love to know where he was overall on their draft board for that year if they didn't need a tackle specifically. But they both have experience with these choice routes. Deshaun Watson ran them under Bill O'Brien in Houston. Jerry Jeudy's been running them basically his whole in their life. They used him in that role a lot in Denver. So I think those two are just kind of aligned in that natural role. And I think they're going to need him to be. I think ideally for the Browns, Jerry Jeudy finally surpasses that 1,000-yard mark this year.
All right, there we go. Big claim that I'm sure would make a ton of Browns fans happy, as will, as Ashley pointed out, seeing that defense just back on the field in general, doing their thing. Check her out at Ashley Bastock 42 on Twitter. Read her over at cleveland.com. Ashley, congratulations on making it to the regular season and out of camp. We appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome stuff there, Dad. And that defense, I kind of ended there because realistically, now that the Ravens defense lost as much as it did off last year, this Browns defense probably walks into the season as the best in the NFL.
I agree, and that's going to help the offense because we still don't know with Deshaun Watson. We still do not know from injury to actual play. I know in the Baltimore game, as Ashley pointed out, going 14 for 14 in the second half, but that's one half of one game. And he's played 12 in the last 2 years and hasn't looked the part of the quarterback he was in Houston. Now, they do have the weapons, bringing in a Jerry Jeudy with Elijah Moore, with Amari Cooper, a David Njoku, but that running back situation will have to work itself out.
Lots of questions in Cleveland. Coming up next, though, lots of questions apparently not going to get answered in Colorado by Deion Sanders. What's going on there next? Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We will get to some interesting policy decisions by the folks out at Colorado football surrounding Deion Sanders and the local media there. But, Dad, we spent so much time talking about Michigan over the last season. With the sign stealing scandal that went on, apparently the NCAA has delivered their notice of allegations to Michigan on this front. And it comes, of course, right as the sign-stealing documentary gets set to hit Netflix. That dropped this morning. Neither you and I have had a chance to watch it yet, but some of the quotes have made their way out there now, and basically boils down to Michigan being accused of going and stealing signs in person through advanced scouting, which is illegal by NCAA rules. Connor the Stallion goes out and denies this, the man at the center of the allegations in the documentary, who we have not heard speak on record until right now. So, Dad, based on what we've seen, have we learned anything new from the quotes making it out of the documentary?
No, we're not going to learn anything new. The most egregious one, I would think, is when asked about being on the sideline of Central Michigan, for Central Michigan, in Central Michigan gear, he said, I don't recall. I don't recall. I mean, isn't that the greatest line in court? I don't recall. He doesn't recall being on the sideline in Central Michigan gear. He basically said, I buy tickets for and give them to people and they go film games. And I had friends, he said, send me film. It's kind of like when your aunt gets you a Christmas gift that you already have. You're not going to be rude and be like, oh, I already have this. I don't want it. You're going to take it and appreciate it. Like he said, but I've already memorized the film. I mean, he's basically poo-pooing it.
Well, it's that sort of confidence that we see in other criminals who almost want to get caught because they want credit for the work that they've done, where he's basically trying to say, I was above those petty things you're accusing me of, and very good at this, because I thought the interesting part that came on this was he got to Michigan in 2018 and said when he got there that he realized Michigan was at the bottom of the, quote, intelligence and operations totem pole, and that he was introduced by someone else into an underground community of college football analysts who trade elements of schemes and game plan to learn certain signals throughout the week. He got asked, obviously, if Michigan was aware that he was in-person sign stealing, and he said, he basically said, I did not obtain signals through in-person scouting, maintains he did it on the video copy like everybody else who's trying to do all of this. And so, Dad, ultimately, I'm with you. I don't think we learned anything new in this other than, one, how he came to be at Michigan, his claims that there is a network of other people trying to do these things, and that he is continuing to deny, the way he did at Michigan, that he was directing other people to go do this, merely saying it just kind of conveniently happened.
Deny or lie. I mean, the circumstance of you not remembering you were in Central Michigan gear on the Central Michigan sideline and you say you don't recall tells me I don't believe anything you're saying.
But that's just lawyer speak. That's lawyer speak. That's what they tell you to say. I don't recall.
You know what they tell you when they tell you to say that? When you're guilty.
Yes.
When you're guilty, they tell you to say that.
You have the right to not self-incriminate, okay?
Right,
so
exactly.
I do not recall.
Exactly. He didn't self-incriminate because he was on the sideline in Central Michigan gear trying to steal signs.
Yes.
And he said, I don't recall, which I don't know how, when you're asked that by the people, if you're in the room being asked, that they don't chuckle, that they don't laugh, that they don't say, are you're seriously telling me you don't remember being in Central Michigan garb on their sidelines?
It's remarkable because, again, these are all, like, some of this is video footage of the interviews between him and the NCAA investigation crew, and he continues to maintain in the documentary. He says, I never advanced scouted, and two, if this was about signals, I obtained signals the way every other team does, through watching TV copies and talking to the other intel guys from other teams. What sets me apart is the way in which I organize that information.
Oh, yes.
Again, this seems like, and what I expected this documentary to be, was an ego trip. trip for someone who wrote an entire manifesto, believed he could eventually lead this Michigan program as a head coach. All of these things reek of a guy who is so confident in his ability. And I was curious if that confidence was going to lead into something leaking out, sort of like A Few Good Men, the courtroom scene that I always, where you've got Colonel Jessup, who is so sure of his own ability and that what he did was right, that at the end of the day, he wants it to leak out there because you want Connor Stallions on that wall. You need Connor Stallions on that wall for Michigan to win a national championship.
And I'm sure Connor's bummed that he's not getting credit for winning the national championship, that he's not put it high up on the pedestal for doing it the right way of helping them get signs.
It's just fascinating. So again, I'm sure we'll get more as more people digest this documentary. It just came out this morning, but certainly wanted to touch on that since what the NCAA ultimately decides to do, still yet to be seen, but seems like coming down the pipeline in the matter of the next couple of months here. Dad, the other bit of interesting from the other day came from Deion Sanders in Colorado, which, surprise, surprise with that statement. It feels like we've been saying that for the last year and a half now. But we got the news the other day. A couple of weeks after Deion Sanders and a local reporter from CBS had gotten into it because Deion refused to answer his questions after a national CBS article unrelated to that author.
He said it was nothing against this particular reporter. He emphasized it's nothing against you. It's just the network you work for.
He took umbrage with something someone else at the network had written and so wouldn't answer his reporters. Now Colorado has banned Denver Post columnist Sean Keeler from asking questions of Deion Sanders or other members of the football program. They said, quote, the CU Athletic Department statement, after a series of sustained personal attacks on the football program and specifically Coach Prime, the CU Athletic Department in conjunction with the football program has decided not to take questions from Denver Post columnist Sean Keeler at football-related events. Now, he is still credentialed. He can still attend team activities and games. They just won't take his questions in the press conference here after they took umbrage with him referring to Deion Sanders as Deposition Deion, the Bruce Lee of BS, a false prophet, and used phrases such as Planet Prime and the Deion Kool-Aid and circus involving what had gone on there at Colorado. So, Dad, as another in a string of these things at Colorado, what was your reaction to hearing this news now added to that group?
I think it just brings more questions and brings more bad light. Again, the Colorado Sports Information staffer told the newspaper Keeler didn't violate any rules at all.
Yes, I think that's a huge part.
Didn't violate anything, just not. And I wonder if Keeler is still trying to ask questions.
They showed a clip the other day of him trying to address this with Deion, and Deion basically said, what's wrong with you? I'm trying to figure this out because what you're doing isn't normal. But to your point, it said he didn't break any rules. Didn't like what you were saying.
Exactly. So I just think that brings more bad spotlight on the program. There was somebody at Jackson State when he was there that they banned who had talked about a player and a domestic violence situation.
Yeah, they banned a reporter from SWAC Media Day for writing a story on a player's domestic violence charge while he was at Jackson State. Right.
So I just think it's like you're writing that check that somebody else has to cash. You're bringing more on your team, more of a negative spotlight on than just let the guy answer or ask a question, give an answer, and he's going to write what he wants to write, and he has the right to write what he wants to write. I just think you're bringing more of a bad spotlight to say, no, you didn't violate any rules. We just don't like the way you're talking about our head coach, so we're not taking your questions. It sounds petty.
It does. It sounds small, and especially coming from a coach and a man in Deion Sanders who is used to being, and has said, I'm used to being in the spotlight. Yes. I'm used to these attacks. This doesn't affect me when the result flies in the face of that. Clearly it does enough to where you're now not going to take this person's press questions in a professional setting here. It's small. It paints the program in a bad light. It to me, is unnecessary because looking at these comments, there's nothing derogatory in here. I don't think a line was truly crossed in terms of the subject matter that this reporter brought up. This just seems like another instance of if you are not part of this church and this cult of personality surrounding Colorado and its coach, you have no place in covering their program.
I just don't understand how Deion could say, I've had all this stuff thrown at me. I've had it for years, this stuff thrown at me, that stuff thrown at me. Yet you say that out of one side of your mouth, and the other side of your mouth, you ban this guy from asking a question. So it is affecting you.
It seems like, once again, everything in life is a drill tweet. I'm not mad. I'm not mad. Don't write in the paper that I was mad.
Yeah.
You just can't have it both ways. You can't invite the media circus to promote the program and then be mad when someone wants to say something that you don't like.
There is a larger conversation maybe to be had about player-led media, the in-house media, all these things that we can have another day.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. Guys, a TikTok creator is going viral for revealing that his mom has a rather unique way of saving names in her contact list for people that she doesn't know all that well. It's pretty hysterical. She goes through and basically has these names for people. Woman that wears skimpy dress in church.
Ooh.
Auntie that sells wigs.
Creative.
It's just gets better and better. Sis in church with lots of makeup. Ooh. Took note of
That's
that
gonna
one.
be tough if these people ever find out
Kind of
how
a burn.
they are the one save.
Friend from Walmart, the funny one.
Okay, that's a win.
That's all right.
Yeah,
That's
that
all
one's
right.
fine. It's kind of funny to me, though, that, this went viral. African store woman that does not smile. These people, it's going viral. So somebody might tell their mom about this. Like,
Yeah.
that she's going to have some explaining to do if she runs into these people.
I was gonna say, like, if you know her and you're in these spaces, there's a couple, it sounds like, in each of these locations. Now all of a sudden you're probably doing the math, like, how often do I smile when I'm in Walmart?
Am I wearing too much makeup in church?
Yeah. These are the questions, the hard-hitting questions that people need to be asking themselves.
But honestly, high key, this guy kind of airing his grandma out a little bit.
Oh, yeah, 100. I think it was his mom.
Oh, his mom.
Yeah,
Sorry.
really
Yeah.
airing
Oh,
his mom out. Yeah, because if it was a grandparent, you might assume a lot of these people are not on TikTok, but it's his mom, so this might get out.
I
But-
appreciate that his mom saves people in her phone like a scorned lover who puts like the red flags or
Yeah,
like,
do not call.
You
Do not
deserve
answer.
better. Like,
Yeah. He's wrong for you. But this made us just wonder about how certain coaches might put people into their contact list if they were doing it this way. You know, if we weren't using names and we were going to go with these descriptions here. So we're going to play a game, okay? We're going to pretend we're looking at Andy Reid's phone and we're going through the contact list and we're going to see which contacts could potentially derail a Chiefs three-peat.
Okay.
So we'll go through, we're going to have some descriptors here, and you guys are going to try and guess who this could be. So, caller 1 is going to be this right here. The guy who fired me.
Okay, the guy who fired me, would that be, was the current Eagles brass there when Andy was there?
I don't know.
I was going to say, I think they fired. Would it be the Eagles?
Was it who?
Was it Howie Roseman?
Yeah! There we go!
Okay.
Look who it
right,
is.
there we go.
Okay.
And would the Eagles have a chance of derailing the Chiefs season? Dad, I don't think so.
No.
Now, I think the Eagles are contenders. I think the changes they've made to their rosters absolutely have them in the mix.
It could be Philly and KC in the Super Bowl. Absolutely. And they could derail the three-peat.
I don't think the Eagles team, even if they got to the Super Bowl in their form, are capable of beating what I think Kansas City is going to be this year.
All
I
right.
will say that.
Okay. We'll see. How about caller number 2? Tall guy, tough to tackle.
Do you know that one? Because I do.
Oh, you do? Is it Lamar Jackson?
No, Derrick Henry.
No.
What?
No.
Oh, Josh Allen.
Yeah.
There we go. Derrick Henry, in my defense, also tall guy, tough to tackle. I covered the Heisman the year Derrick won for ESPN Radio, and there's a picture of the two of us staring eye to eye. I am a 6'4" former offensive lineman. He is a terrifying, scary runner.
I had a gig with him when the draft was in Nashville, and same thing. He came. I'm 6'5". He came walking in, and not only was he bigger than me, but looking me eye to eye, I'm like, my God. How do you tackle this guy?
That being said, same question you could ask for Josh Allen, who is also a tall guy who is tough to tackle. And Dad, I do think they are capable of this. I am, like a lot of others, and I've seen our buddy Mina Kimes, friend of the program, also high on this Buffalo team. I don't think there's going to be a fall-off. I'm picking this team to win the AFC East, and I do think while Josh Allen is at the helm, I get you're going to need Keon Coleman in this receiver room to sort of come along as the year goes along.
Right.
But I think right now in the last couple of years, we've seen having a dominant ground attack and a defensive front seven that can get after it can get you a long way, combined with a QB super weapon. I think they're capable.
I think it's a better chance of Philly meeting them in the Super Bowl and beating KC than Buffalo beating KC.
Listen, would I pick Buffalo when matched up against them? No, but I think Buffalo's a better team than Philadelphia.
And I think Philly is a better team than Buffalo. I don't think any team. I think we both think the KC is favored.
Yeah, spoiler alert, when we do this next week, I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. I just let you guys know that right now.
Okay, spoiler alert. How about caller number 3? Okay. Old friend starts with J.
Old friend.
Old friend.
Starts with J.
Starts with J. Used to be on Reid's staff.
Okay.
Oh, man.
He's got a brother.
Oh, John Harbaugh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Wow.
There we go.
Thanks for the
Yeah, got a brother.
So, again, I did a little game of contender and pretender the other day with friends of the program, Nate Tyson, Charles McDonald, and I still think the Ravens are contenders. I do not think that they can beat the Chiefs, though, right? Let's put it this way. They would need to do in 2024 what the Chiefs did in 2023, which is have some things come together as the season goes along, because the offensive line's got a bunch of new pieces.
Defense lost some pieces.
Some pieces. The cores are all still there, and I do think offensively, tales of the Ravens' demise might be a bit premature. You got Todd Monken back in year 2, and with Lamar Jackson, almost a fifth of his rushing attempts last year went for 10 or more yards. You have that in a backfield with Derrick Henry, who amongst running backs with 100-plus carries in 2023 is second to only Christian McCaffrey in terms of yards after contact per rush.
Which isn't stunning.
So you've got one guy who's going to run through your face on defense. You've got one guy that's going to run away from you in the same backfield running some of the read option stuff that's a part of what they do. All of that combined with Mark Andrews being back, makes the job of an offensive line easier when you can window dress, when you've got those kind of credible threats that a defense on the backside or on the second level has to recognize. So I do think they got guys that rotated in that bunch last year. Guys like Roger Rosengartner are going to be new on the scene and rookies that have to contend with that. But I do think they can help bring those guys along and are capable.
Who contends more in the AFC, Baltimore or Buffalo?
Man. Who?
Because I think they both win their division.
I'll say Buffalo right now just because Baltimore lost so much.
Yeah.
Buffalo, there's some continuity that's lost for Buffalo, but Stephon Diggs was not as productive in the back half and not as big a part of the offense in the back half of last season. They weathered the storm with a lot of injuries on defense, and those are the guys, Jordan Poyer, Trey White, that are gone that were banged up last year. Losing Matt Milano before the season is tough.
Yeah.
Man, it's really tough. It might be Buffalo just slightly above Baltimore.
And I would think I would put Baltimore slightly above Buffalo. All right, what else we got?
All right, that other tight end, don't answer.
That other tight end.
He was featured on a show.
Oh, George Kittle.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hey.
All right, yeah, George Kittle, who was featured on the Receiver Netflix documentary.
Right.
That is half of his job stake there. The 49ers, Dad, obviously the biggest threat. They're, I think, in most places, the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl.
Yep.
They're a tremendously talented roster that we talked about. Dealing with the AUG contract. Dealing, I think, even more importantly for them with the Trent Williams situation.
Yeah, that could turn into an issue.
Dad, you did the 49ers and Green Bay Packers NFC Championship game last year.
Yes, I did.
Last year. And watching that game, watching the 49ers playoff run, the one thing that bothered Brock Purdy was that pressure up the middle. Smaller quarterback and a team and an offense that usually tries to get him on the move. In obvious situations, that became an issue. Trent Williams is far and away the best offensive lineman on that team. And I know the value of one offensive lineman could sometimes be hard to quantify, but man, when you've got one guy you know can so well handle the best pass rusher on that side, you can allocate resources to help everyone else. So that's a huge deal for that team.
Yeah. They had the offensive firepower to make up for Ayuk, even though he led in receptions. They have the firepower, but Trent Williams and Trent Williams looks like he can be the long holdout.
I think it's the unsexy answer. It's the lame answer because it's just chalky, but they are still, to me, the biggest threat to the Chiefs.
I agree.
All right, we have time for one more quick 50 seconds. Let's see. Old Packers guy 1.
Aaron Rodgers and the Jets.
That was going to be old Packers guy 2.
Old Packers guy 2. Mike McCarthy.
Mike McCarthy was old Packers guy 1, and
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers was old Packers guy 2.
Dad, bigger threat, the Cowboys or the Jets for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Oh, wow. I would say the Jets.
Wow. All right.
I would say that, and I don't think either.
Yeah.
I don't think either. Make no mistake. I don't think either have it in for the.
Dad picking the Jets to beat the Chiefs in the AFC playoffs.
No.
You heard it first here, folks.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. A team with a lot to prove fell flat on Saturday. FSU, after being left out of the college football playoffs last year, coming in with high hopes to the season, suffering that season-opening loss in Ireland. So let's talk about some other teams that are going to have a lot to prove this season. Ohio State Buckeyes are under the microscope, okay? Ryan Day could be on the hot seat maybe if things don't go well, but he is in a good spot. He goes into the season with some big transfers, $20 million in NIL money. That is a lot. Former title-winning Buckeye Cardale Jones, who founded one of Ohio State's collectives, had this to say: I would argue it's national championship or bust. I don't think beating Michigan, I don't think winning the Big Ten championship game and just going to the playoffs is enough. And of course, there was an article about this, and Lane Kiffin did his thing and tweeted it on. He went onto Twitter and tweeted the article about how Ohio State built a $20 million national championship or bust roster. Guys, Ole Miss, Ohio State, two of the bigger winners of the portal cycle in the offseason. Lane Kiffin just being Lane Kiffin here. But would you say the Buckeyes are kind of at the top of that list of most to prove here?
Ooh, and buddy, they have offered that up of their own accord. Reading this article, so Jake Trotter wrote this on ESPN.com, and one of the things that stuck out to me, we've heard this sort of figure batted around all offseason, but seeing in this article, Day's vision became a reality. This is the quote. Buoyed by a name, image, and likeness war chest this year of $20 million, according to athletic director Ross Bajork, who came over from Texas A&M, they went on wax and said, yeah, we spent $20 million on the players that you are going to see because we looked and saw that had been an issue with them in the past, Dad. They had deemed that players they had lost out on the recruiting process were largely due to NIL, and said watching their rival in Michigan not only beat them but win a national title, something Day hasn't done since he got to Ohio State, absolutely created this windfall of donor money.
I mean, it's twofold. Not winning a national title, watching Michigan win a national title, and having Michigan beat you 3 years in a row. I mean, it's just everything is stacked up against Ryan Day right now to where they have, the last title they had was in, 14? And their talent level between players they always recruit great players, and transfers, of which one of them that came from the SEC actually said the reason he didn't go to Ohio State a few years ago was the lack of NIL money. So they are poised, and I think even though he's 53-8, is that his record?
Oh yeah, Ryan Day has been by any other college's metric, he has been a overwhelming success.
You're talking about him on the hot seat. A, if you don't beat Michigan, and B, if you're not in it if you're not winning the national title. Now, and I think it added to it. Not only did Michigan beat him 3 times, but Michigan won the national championship. So they're and Michigan's not a better team this year, but it doesn't matter. They have the national title from last year. They've won the last 3 games.
And remember, it was shoe on the other foot for a while where Michigan wanted to run Jim Harbaugh.
We thought Harbaugh was going to get run.
For that same reason.
For losing Ohio State, not winning a Big Ten championship, not winning a national title, of which he did it all, and then bolted to the NFL.
And remember, that's not a new concept in some of these conferences when you are the teams in the upper crust of the sport. We saw this happen to plenty of coaches. Mark Richt was winning 9-10 games a year at Georgia, but you weren't beating Alabama on the teams you needed to. LSU and Les Miles fell into that same boat where Les Miles won a national championship, but then was not consistently contending enough after that to get the long leash, and so he got shown the door. This is what happens when you're staring down one of your rivals succeeding at a level that the people with money don't deem acceptable. So it was just interesting, Dad. And so much of the NIL era has been supposing and wondering what players are making, what's going on, what schools are spending. Now we're starting to get to the point where a lot more of this is out there in front, and what it does, kind of like when you've got a player's salary leak or when we see people in the media's salary leak, is all right, now it crystallizes the expectation. Because now if Ohio State falls short, and they are, according to DraftKings Sportsbook odds, to win the national championship, they're second behind only Georgia. To make the CFP, we've got over on the board right here, they're first ahead of Georgia to make the CFP. They are at minus 650 to make the college football playoff, which means either you win the Big Ten or you're right there in contention with it. But, Dad, I do think they have by far the most pressure on them in the sport, and having this number out there just solidifies it, where now all of the donors are looking at Ryan Day are going, we gave you a roster that even Urban Meyer said might be the most talented he's ever seen.
And this is where NIL and the donorship starts to maybe run into a problem. If they don't, do these donors keep giving? You know, do you keep you're trying to be, you know, because donors love to have their name attached to things and associated with great things. So the donors want to puff their chest out and say, yeah, we donated big money to the NIL and they won a national championship. We're part of the national championship. Donors feel more part of national championships now through NIL than they ever have. And they love that thought process. So if you're giving big bucks and you're not taking it across the finish line, then does that same donor give the same amount of money? Or is it like, wait, what am I giving money for here?
Do they give the same amount of money while Ryan Day is still the coach? That's what the conversation would become, and that's where the pressure would start to mount. And I think that's a lot more tied, Dad, I don't think this is crazy, to the Michigan game than it is the national title. If Ohio State somehow lost a heartbreaker in the national championship to Georgia, the other team that's been one of the best recruiting teams, but Georgia's been the face of the sport now for the last number of years, even not winning the title last year. I think that would be more palatable than if they somehow this year lost to this Michigan team that's replacing as much as they did, that's got a new coach that's not Jim Harbaugh, that's facing NCAA sanctions. That would be a fireable offense.
Do you want to talk about...
In their mind. I'm not saying I want to run Ryan Day out of town. I want to be clear. I got respect for the job he does. But if they lose to Michigan this year, I won't be stunned when those people try and fire him.
Sherrone Moore is on the opposite side of Ryan Day. Sherrone Moore does not have the pressure on him of coming off a national championship because he is a first-time head coach. They lost a ton of players. So the expectation, I don't think, from the fans or the donors is you're going to be hunting for a back-to-back national championship. And while there's always the pressure to beat Ohio State, I get it. I think that Sherrone Moore has a little bit of a longer leash in, okay, you loaded up, you had a great team to win the title last year, you lost a bunch of players, you lost your head coach, even though he was a substitute interim head coach for a bit and won. I don't think there's nearly the pressure on him.
Well, that's interesting because I wanted to look at other teams going into the season that, especially in expanded playoff, now all of a sudden have a different level of, because we've talked about this both ways, where people look at the expanded playoff and say, in the past, that on your resume, being a coach that has led your team to the college football playoff for a lot of places might help keep a coach's job a little bit longer. And would this expanded playoff lead to more coaches getting a little bit longer of a leash? It also creates a bit of put up or shut up for a bunch of teams. So you're saying Michigan, not in that category. Them making the playoff is not paramount to their long-term success.
No, I don't think so at all, given what they did last year and the amount of players that they lost. Now, I understand you can rebuild through the transfer portal in a year, but they had so many holes to fill, and of course they recruit and get high recruits in. But I do not think Sherrone Moore has that pressure on him. Certainly not. I think Ryan Day easily has the most. I don't think there's pressure on Sherrone Moore. Obviously, there always is when you play Ohio State. Don't get me wrong.
There is, and in general, at a program like Michigan, who's still fourth best odds to win the Big Ten, according to DraftKings Sportsbook. It's really where after Michigan is where you start to get into the long odds for teams like USC and Iowa in that conference. But I think it would be understandable to a lot of people if they took a step back. I think much like we've seen with some other teams. Florida State's a good example where, hey, you were at the top. You peaked at the right time, veteran roster in a lot of ways. Jim Harbaugh is your head coach. Can you sustain that going forward? Florida State had to answer that question, and they failed their first part of the assignment. For Michigan, I do think that's part of it. But Sherrone Moore, who we don't know his role or what the punishment's going to look like in his part in the sign-stealing allegations, where you had the text messages deleted between him and Connor Stallions that were part of this NCAA investigation. I do think when Michigan hired him, it was an understanding that, hey, this year we're going to have to deal with some stuff. This is about a long-term view and continuity from a guy that was an important part of that staff who got you that win.
I think maybe next on the list or higher on the list is Mario Cristobal from Miami.
Interesting.
They've had top 10, a couple of top 10 recruiting classes, and they're going to have another one in 25. They had a top 10 portal. We now start ranking the portal classes
very much
as well.
so. I would say like 24/7 Sports ranks the portal classes every year.
They have a top 10 portal class as well. And I would say just as of recently, you saw Florida State lose a conference game to Georgia Tech in Ireland. So I think that even opened Miami fans' eyes wider to say, oh, Florida State, the favorite, already has a loss. So
there's no doubt.
I think what he's built, we ask every year, is Miami back, is Texas back? And Texas certainly proved that they were back. Miami keeps kind of hitting road bumps. But I think it's now time with the recruiting classes, a couple years under your belt, a good recruiting class, good portal class led by Cam Ward coming in at quarterback, that and in a winnable conference that's top heavy with Florida State, with Miami, with Clemson. Maybe you want to throw Virginia Tech in there, but pretty top-heavy conference.
Yeah, right now on DraftKings Sportsbook, Clemson, the odds-on favorite at plus 280 at this point. Miami at plus 360 behind them. Now in front of Florida State, who's dropped back, obviously. They have the one loss under their belt at plus 600. And you're right, Dad. I think there is that growing sense. They went 5-7 his first year, 7-6 last year. But I think as much as anything, and for Mario and company, it's always been, hey, we saw what Justin Herbert became in the NFL. Won 2 Pac-12 titles out with Oregon, but we never really felt like we saw a fully unleashed Justin Herbert as a passer in that offense. Now you come over here, and in the first 2 years, you've got the horrible gaffe from the Georgia Tech game last year, where they lose because Mario Cristobal and that staff don't call the victory kneel when they should, give up the ball on a fumble on a run, and the rest is history there. So they've got to go out there and do some winning to wipe the stench off that. Mario's got to go and on the field prove that, hey, we can take all those recruiting wins and turn those into dubs on the field with a group that does have, I mean, Cam Ward, probably the highest ceiling of any coach in the any quarterback in the AFC, or excuse me, AFC, in the ACC. Coming over this season. Probably the highest ceiling of any of the guys we're going to talk about amongst DJU, amongst Cade Klubnik at Clemson, the true contenders in that conference.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think another coach on the hot seat with pressure is James Franklin at Penn State. They've won 20 consecutive games against teams not named Ohio State and Michigan, of which they've lost the last 6 to those. So it's about getting over that hump. We keep saying, when are they going to get over the hump? When are they going to get over the hump? Now, they may be able to make it into the playoffs because of the expanded playoffs, but it's been Ohio State and Michigan ruling the roost.
They have. I don't expect them to beat Ohio State this year in the Big Ten. I think that's really a job that only Oregon can do as presently constructed, at least the confidence I have. But it's got to be a step forward. They're one of the ones when we talk about who is the pressure most on to make the playoff in this current iteration of the sport with 12 teams. I think it's Penn State. I think it's Ole Miss. I think it's Notre Dame in terms of and I think Miami in that vein. I think those teams, you have to make the playoff this year. If you're those squads, the way that you've gone out. Penn State, another one, perennially pumping great guys into the NFL, bringing in big-time talent here. Drew Aller's a big-time quarterback recruit. Everyone couldn't wait to see get on the field. And then last year in the biggest games of the year, Penn State didn't trust him to throw the ball downfield at all. What we saw with DJ was true for Drew Aller and that Penn State offense against Michigan and against Ohio State in those big games last year. And so can Andy Kotelnicki coming over from Kansas unlock another level of that for a roster that's always extremely talented, where we talked about this with Ryan Day before. James Franklin's been at Penn State for a decade now. He's the second longest tenured head coach in the Big Ten. He's 4th in Penn State history with 88 wins so far. And through 10 years, he's got a better winning percentage than Joe Paterno did through 10 years. He's got a ton of money he leveraged in, that LSU job into that 10-year, $75 million deal. They've got to make the postseason with this roster. There's no two ways about it there. But I do think that applies to Ole Miss and to Notre Dame, to our alma mater that's getting ready to go on the road in Kyle Field.
I think Notre Dame is there. It's the third-year pressure.
Yeah.
The third year as a Notre Dame head coach pressure, of which there have been a number of them, but 3 have won national championships in their third year, and it's Marcus Freeman's third year. Ara Parseghian in '66 went 9-0-1, the famous tie against Michigan State. They won the national championship that year. Dan Devine in '77, that was my brother Bob's junior year. They went 11-1, lost to Mississippi, Ole Miss, the second game, I think, of the season, and then ran the table, beat Texas. That had the Heisman Trophy winner and Earl Campbell and a bunch of stud players on it. They blew them out in the Cotton Bowl to win the national championship. Then Lou Holtz in '88 went 12-0, beat West Virginia in the bowl game, won the national championship. And then, quite honestly, got close but no cigar. Was Brian Kelly's third year, was your senior year when you guys went 12-0, played the national championship and lost to Alabama, but went 12-0 in the regular season. This is now Marcus Freeman's third year. The schedule is favorable. Tough game, obviously, opening weekend this weekend at Kyle Field against Texas A&M. then have Florida State later on in November, have Clemson.
They have no, they don't play Clemson this year.
Don't play Clemson.
They play Florida State, but they play Georgia Tech. They play Louisville. They play USC at the end of the year. So there's some challenging, but overall not the usual juggernaut schedule for Notre Dame. I don't think, Dad, it's national championship or bust that third-year creates that. But they need to make the playoff this year. They've got the schedule for it. And Marcus Freeman and the staff, they've done everything right in terms of how they've gone about building this. Notre Dame has met the portal era and NIL with more force than I expected, quite frankly. They went out and have been active in the last couple of years. Riley Leonard was going to be a very coveted quarterback for whoever went after him in the portal. And Notre Dame got him on campus. Notre Dame took Mike Denbrock, fresh off a season where he helped the Heisman Trophy winner in Jaden Daniels at LSU, and got him over as a coordinator hire this offseason. And so you've got a lot of the pieces there. For Notre Dame, the difference between can you be a playoff team, which with this schedule, they should be. 11-1 should be attainable for that group.
They should be a high rank. Again, can't be in the top 4 because they're not in the conference, but they should have a home game. I think the expectation is they should have a home game, that they should be 11-1 at worst, have a home game, which would be ranked 5 through 8. 5 through 8 has a home game. December 20th is the first round, and then go from there.
The difference with this team, with the roster that they've got on defense, which brought back damn near everyone in a group that was a top 5-ish unit in college football and should be this year, an offense that poured in a bunch of receivers. We talked to Bo Collins the other day, Chris Mitchell from FIU. Jaden Greathouse, who was on the roster, one of the guys from last year who is getting great reports out of camp. Mitchell Evans, the tight end, who's going to be a draft nick guy. The difference is going to be the offensive line, a position that has been the face of this school for most of my adult lifetime.
They are in big-time transition.
So Tyler Horka, who covers Notre Dame for On3, said this the other day. The Notre Dame media guide has game-by-game starters for every season dating back to 1982. The Irish have had at least one senior start along the offensive line in all 42 season openers since then. That streak will now end based on the first depth chart we saw the other day for Notre Dame that lists all underclassmen in terms of starting on that team, including Anthony Knapp, a true freshman who's going to start at left tackle over Tosh Baker, who's a graduate student on that group. Sam Pendleton at left guard, who's a redshirt freshman on that roster. So you've got a lot of youth and unproven talent on that group. And they're talented. They're Notre Dame offensive line recruits.
Exactly.
You know they're talented players, but they haven't played a lot of ball. So
not a lot of experience.
That unit's development under O-line coach Joe Rudolph is going to go a long way in determining, is this a team that can make the playoff or is this a team that can win in the playoffs?
That's where I think Riley Leonard really comes in big this year, being able to run the way he can run and having being the running threat to help that offensive line out, because it is an inexperienced offensive line.
It is 100%. And for Ole Miss, it's a lot of the same conversation. The difference isn't the reason I don't think there's as much pressure on them is because the pressure for Ole Miss has really, I think, been when was Lane going to leave?
Right.
And when the Alabama job closed up, I thought of the jobs that might actually come open, what else would Lane really be all that interested in? He's brought this Ole Miss program into some of the best years of its life. 11-1 last season. Jackson Dart coming back at the helm of that offense, coordinated by Charlie Weiss Jr. A defense that poured in some big-time names along the front to try and play ball with these guys that have pushed them around at certain times.
They're just in the SEC, so they were never near the top. But hope springs eternal with the 12-team playoff. And the fact that the SEC could get 3, maybe 4 teams in. I think the number is kind of set at 3.
I'd say the over-under is probably 3.5 for them, and I favor the over. I mean, we did our playoff predictions for the 12th team. I had 4 SEC teams in there, including Ole Miss. Looking at their schedule this year, they're another one. Like Notre Dame, when the schedule lines up like this, and you've got veteran talent in a lot of the right places, you are understandably expected to be involved in this dance.
They're set up, just like I think Notre Dame is set up to have a big year. I think Ole Miss is set up to have a nice year, and the timing of the expanded playoff certainly helps.
Again, playing the schedule game with Ole Miss this year. Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern, and then Kentucky, South Carolina. At LSU, they play Oklahoma at home, they get Georgia at home, and then Florida and Mississippi State to end the season. So again, you don't have to play Alabama in that season there. You miss a couple of the big bads. You don't have to play Texas this season in the SEC.
And Oklahoma, the thought is they may be down this year with a real inexperienced offensive line.
Exactly. So you got got to go on the road to LSU, but getting Georgia at home. Again, the schedule is laid out. A bunch of teams now where, again, the conversation changes this year as we expand the playoff to include more teams going forward. Coming up next, Mike Sando dropped the QB tiers article. You know we got to pop in and check in with that next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. here in the Boston studio together. Guys, Mike Sando released his QB tiers list ahead of the start of the NFL season, and it got us chatting. All right, do we agree with the list? Do we feel some people were snubbed and left out of tier 1? What's our take on this?
Yeah, so every summer, for anyone unfamiliar, Mike Sando goes around and pulls 50 NFL coaches and executives for their say on how they would rank some of the best quarterbacks in the league, tallies the vote, and then creates the tiers, which Dad, as we know, kind of put them into groupings, but also have them listed in the order in terms of the amount of votes that they got in each tier and rank the quarterbacks. Some unsurprising marks on this. Patrick Mahomes, once again at the top of the list. He has received all 50, of the 50 coaches and executives polled, he received 50 tier 1 votes for the third straight year. So 150 straight votes for him as the clear best quarterback in the NFL. No surprises there. Dad, the biggest surprise for me, though, tier 1 of this list ended up breaking down to 3 quarterbacks. It was Patrick Mahomes, understandably at the top of the heap.
Right.
Joe Burrow, second behind him, coming back off injury.
And his votes actually went down from last year because he had the injury.
Yep, went down, but still a definite tier 1 quarterback by the 50 people polled here. And then Josh Allen rounds out that list. Lamar Jackson at 4th overall in terms of votes, but in the tier 2. Are you surprised by that?
Oh, yeah, he should be in tier 1. I think there's 2 other quarterbacks that should be in tier 1. He should be in tier 1. He had 23 tier 1 votes, which more than he had the past 3 previous years.
Previous.
Three previous. Yeah, previous 3.
Previous.
Yeah.
There you go. Previous.
Good word.
Yeah. Let's make that a word.
Should we just?
Threevious.
All right.
Yeah.
Threevious.
There we go.
All right. I'll forget
Write
I
that
said
down.
it in a while. I think he's definitely a tier 1 guy. I'm stunned he's not tier 1.
I would agree. Most people pointed to the playoff record, 2-4 in the
Right,
playoffs,
right.
career 75.7 passer rating in those seasons. And I understand that, but I also think Lamar Jackson now 2 MVPs at an incredibly young age, a guy who for a long time kind of had to lift that team. I think by the end of the Greg Roman era, which, oh, by the way, he is the coordinator for Justin Herbert, who we're all wondering if he's going to take that next step. After last time on Dragon Ball Z, us saying he was a big part of why we hadn't seen the next step from Lamar Jackson, who took it with Todd Monken last year.
Right.
We saw, even for Lamar Jackson, who's been a good passer, like, man, go back and watch the college stuff.
Yep.
He did it. But in the NFL, now put in that position with more weapons on that team, we saw some of the best pocket passing of Lamar's career last season and expect him to build on it. So I was surprised for that reason. Coming off another MVP, seeing the way he did it, where I get it, the stats always didn't give it up last year in terms of volume. But man, watching the ball from Lamar Jackson last season, that was mastery in the pocket from one of the best players in the NFL. Should have been a tier 1.
You agree, tier 1. Others in tier 2, Lamar, Matt Stafford, Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, CJ Stroud, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts.
That's tier 2, right?
That's
all
tier 2.
tier 2.
That's tier 2. I would still have Aaron Rodgers in tier 1.
Really?
Yes. I would
Even
still,
based off what we saw his last year in Green Bay, where with that young receiving group, statistically it all plummeted a bit for him.
Yeah, I would still have him in tier 1.
See,
yes.
I think he's right in the right spot on this list right now.
I mean, because this is listed in order, so he is basically 4, 5, 6, 7.
He's 7th.
7.
Which I think, given him coming off injury, haven't seen him play football
Now
near
Joe
the last
Burrow's
time
coming
we
off
did.
injury.
Oh,
Joe Burrow's second.
I understand that, and I'm surprised that Joe Burrow's second. I probably would have had Josh Allen in that 2 spot. I probably would have had Lamar Jackson in the 3 spot.
I agree.
If I was ranking this, and would have had Joe Burrow at least 4th there. The one I was heartened to see, because the conversation that has happened with him in terms of the fan discussion and the QB wins as a stat going back to his time in Detroit and now, Matthew Stafford and the renaissance in reputation over the last couple of years, led, I think, in no small part by the people that play the position. Seeing C.J. Stroud and seeing Caleb Williams, both young players coming up who have a lot, one in C.J. Stroud who has already accomplished to some extent, and one in Caleb Williams who comes in with the weight of expectation, have both said when pressed, yeah, I watch this dude when I want to learn how to play ball better because he goes out there and rips it. Matthew Stafford getting his flowers at this point in his career is a 36-year-old quarterback who, based on the physicality of the way he has played the position, the Maverick style, we don't know how much longer if he'll be a guy that plays nearing 40 with his body. I'm glad to see him getting the top 5 respect that I think he richly deserves. I think he's in the right spot.
I do think at times he's forgotten. Kind of like Justin Herbert is given sometimes more credit because the team doesn't do a lot.
Sure.
But
that was an interesting comp that got made in here, by the way, is if Justin Herbert gets into a situation change like Stafford, could he have that similar type jump?
But Justin Herbert's going to be on a team now that's going to run the ball, we think, more with Jim Harbaugh. So what is that going to do to his, because the dude's got a howitzer for an arm, and he's ranked right below Stafford in the 6th spot. So listen, I just don't know how much his arm will be counted on. I think in crucial situations it will, but they're planning on running the ball. They want to be a ball control offense with Justin Herbert, the gun-armed quarterback.
And I think as much as that will be also the improvement of everywhere else. Mike Sando points out in this article, over the last 3 years, the Chargers were 10th in offensive expected points added over the course of the season, in part which Herbert affects. They were 31st in the combined expected points added on defense and special teams, according to True Media. So defense and special teams in the Brandon Staley era, especially with Justin Herbert at the helm, did not back up their quarterback at all. Now, the biggest question mark for me, this is coming off a preseason where he dealt with the plantar fascia injury to his foot. After a season last year where we saw Justin Herbert miss the first real time of his NFL career due to injury to his finger down the stretch of the season, durability for a guy who plays the position as physically as he does at times, where the sell is, hey, big, strong, rocket-armed quarterback is going to be able to shrug off tacklers. That's the one thing I do worry about is, does that start to be something we see come up more with him now?
Is there a tier 3 quarterback that you think should be in tier 2? Tua Tagovailoa is in tier 3, Trevor Lawrence, tier 3, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson, I mean, I
don't understand how you can justify that one.
I would even put him down lower. He hasn't proven anything.
No.
Since and I know part of it's injury, but even play when he's played has not proven a whole lot.
I'm surprised he's that high above like Geno Smith. Who
Deshaun Watson, me too.
Let's put it this way. They also tracked, who moved and changed the most this last year. Brock Purdy and Jordan Love tied for the biggest jump. They both jumped up 13 spots over the course of this last year, understandably being two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL statistically last year. I think Geno Smith could have not that kind of rise, but I guess they wrote me off and I didn't write back from a couple seasons ago. A dip last year, somewhat due to injury.
Yes.
If he stays healthy in Ryan Grubb's offense in Seattle this season, I think we could be talking about a guy who jumps up quite a bit over the course of this next season. I don't have that same confidence in Deshaun Watson's ability to do so at this point, based on the injury that we talked about earlier in the show and based on the play we've seen since he returned from
I am surprised he's in Tier 3. Trevor Lawrence, again, you can't put where they're paid into this because a quarterback's a different position. He's a top paid quarterback, he and Joe Burrow. But in Tier 3, Trevor Lawrence?
A little surprised by that. He's another one's going to have his chance in the sun to jump up this season. Weapons-wise, we'll see if he's capable of that. But that is an interesting one because he is paid like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and yet the way he is viewed is as a quarterback in the middle of that pack, which most notably, again, Tua Tagovailoa, another big-time payday. And this is the point we've made about quarterbacks. It's a crowded field when you talk about top 10. Getting down to having Tua ranked as the 15th best quarterback.
Led the league in passing yards.
Yeah, it's not a slight, though. It's just an acknowledgement. There's a lot of talent at this position right now in the NFL. Jordan Love, who everyone fell in love with last year, pun fully intended.
Yes.
Right ahead of him at the 14 spot. Where are you at on Brock Purdy at 12, Dad? He's in Tier 2. He was one of the biggest risers. He jumped up 13 spots from last year, so just a couple ahead of Jordan Love, who did the same thing. Last year, led the league in EPA per dropback, led the league in most meaningful statistics.
Always going to be downgraded because of the talent level they have on offense.
Sure.
Especially Christian McCaffrey. I mean, but with Debo, with Ayuk, if he's going to be there, with George Kittle, with that O-line, without Trent Williams, but usually with Trent Williams, that he gets downgraded saying, he has all this talent when he's showing he's a pretty damn good quarterback.
He is. He's someone who does.
He's going to get paid, by the way, next year.
He is, certainly. And I think, listen, the lack of overwhelming physical tools obviously factors into it. The offense he came up with, all that stuff makes it where, again, I look at this and I go, probably where he belongs. And again, not a slight. It is not going to prevent him from getting paid, and it's certainly not going to prevent that team from going out and being, again, checks notes, the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl. Not surprising there. Coming up next, though, how surprising is it the Cowboys continue to do business like this? David Helman joins us to explain. back to GoJo and Golic. We started off the show with the news that broke yesterday. CeeDee Lamb, the beneficiary of a 4-year, $136 million contract extension with the Dallas Cowboys. For more on that, we go to the man I've called, he's the Jerry Jones whisperer. He's my Dallas Cowboys source. Anytime weird stuff happens with this organization, which thankfully for those of us in the media happens to be a lot of times. David Helman, kind enough to join us now, host of the NFL on Fox podcast. Dave, good morning, man. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I don't know if anybody can truly claim to fully understand Jerry Jones, but I do my best.
Well, you wrote about yesterday an article on Fox's website that people can check out about the way that Dallas continually seems to go about these contract negotiations. So what has the through line been for Dallas and their stars, and why does this keep happening?
I think at this point you just have to say it's the way the Cowboys prefer to do business, right? And I've said this. I said this all along. You know, it's nice to feel smart when you call a situation correctly, but the Cowboys have given us a very detailed roadmap of how they do these things, and they kind of run the same playbook year after year. You know, I've been around this team for a long time, and typically there's two types of contract that get done in Dallas. If the player is willing to settle for a little bit less, maybe slot in just below the top of the market, take a deal that's not resetting anything or not pushing the top of the market, it's going to get done quickly. It's going to get done ahead of time. It's going to get done with a lot of fanfare. If the player is pushing to set milestones or be at the very top, in the case of CeeDee Lamb, actually right below Justin Jefferson, but still very clearly above every other receiver in the marketplace. When that happens, the Cowboys tend to draw it out. Call it what you want to. Call it driving a hard bargain. I happen to think the Cowboys are very stubborn and don't like to admit the situations that they're in a lot of times, but we've seen this play out with Zeke Elliott. We've seen this play out with Dak Prescott. If you want to go way back in time, it happened with Dez Bryant, you know, back when a $15 million receiver was an unheard of thing. And here we are with a $34 million receiver, and it played out the same way. But the biggest consistency is typically the player winds up getting exactly what they want. And so after all of that pomp and circumstance and blustering in the media, CeeDee Lamb, I think, won these negotiations, and it was pretty easy to see coming.
Yeah, and he obviously didn't have a choice on where else he was going to play, unlike Dak Prescott, who can play out the year and be amazingly an unrestricted free agent for a quarterback of this caliber, which would almost be unheard of in the league. Where does it stand now with Dak?
It's going to be so interesting. And I've been saying this for quite a while, it's just hard to imagine that Dak is going to get to the 5-yard line and surrender that leverage. And that's really where I think this is, because you guys know as well as I do, it can be done, don't get me wrong, but by and large, you don't see major deals get done while a season is going on. There's too much going on. There's too much fluctuation from week to week. And so if you view the start of the season as a bit of a deadline for Dak, he's right there, man. It's a week away, a week and a half away. And it's hard to imagine him giving that up. But now that CD's out of the way, A, now that they've, made that spend, and B, committed to have an all-pro receiver on the roster for the foreseeable future, maybe that makes it a little bit easier. And I think if Dallas can get it done with Dak, it is a huge gesture of goodwill, in my opinion. Because like you just pointed out, Dak is, in March, he will be able to drive a crazy, price war, get several teams involved, and truly set some crazy benchmarks if that's what he wants to do. And so if this gets done in the next week and a half, maybe it's a sign that the relationship is a lot stronger than even a lot of us think, if these two sides can come to an agreement here before the season starts.
And Dave, that's kind of the thing I always think back on here is what this does to some of the relationships with the stars in the building. You mentioned the other ones. We saw this happen with Zach Martin last year, who had to hold out in training camp to get a deal done for a guy that's a future Ring of Honor member here. Dak Prescott's their star quarterback, and you have Micah Parsons retweeting the things that are going on with CeeDee Lamb, clearly noticing as the guy next in line. Is there any net effect that this has that's a negative for the Cowboys other than just being kind of annoying publicly?
you would think, right? And I'm with you. You sit there and you're like, man, you got to make Zach Martin work for his money, who's going to stroll into the Hall of Fame when he's done playing. Micah Parsons is clearly taking notice. Micah Parsons is going to have a case to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the league sometime soon. You would think that it has an effect, but then CD gets his deal. And we see this time and time again, like Jerry loves his guys. I think by and large, even with all the annoyances and all of the drama that goes with being a Cowboy, players still want to play here. It's a great market. It's a great owner to play for. You're going to make more money between the lack of state income tax and the marketability that goes with being on the Dallas Cowboys. I think players by and large want to put up with it. And really, for as much as we criticize the Cowboys, would anything be more on brand than if Jerry manages to now get Dak under contract before the season and he can sit there and kind of wink at all of us and say, what were you worried about? Like, I can't say that would be surprising. It would be a little bit annoying just because of what they put us through and all the uncertainty, but I can't say it would be surprising.
It's a little annoying, I think, to fans, but to the players. But as you mentioned, the players eventually get their money, so they end up happy. And I would imagine you would know better. Micah Parsons, he's seen this happen to other great players making huge money. So if he doesn't get his money till next offseason, it wouldn't be a shock if it were maybe into training camp before he got his money. But he's seen it happen before, so maybe there won't be as much animosity. Is that possible?
I think you just kind of understand once you've been in Dallas for a while that there is an element of show business to this whole thing. And I'm sure fans don't want to hear that, but I think players are probably at peace with it. And like I said, all things being equal, I still think most players would rather be in Dallas and get all the benefits that come with it, even if it means there's a few extra headaches. I mean, if we're being real, Micah Parsons did the Cowboys a hell of a favor by not being more difficult about his money. I mean, we saw Jamar Chase stage a hold in after his third season. Like, Micah could theoretically be holding out right now, but he was willing to play ball and wait, and it seems like he's going to get his contract sometime in 2025. So all of that being said, I think Micah is cool with it, and at the end of the day, like I already said, I think players understand the benefits of being a star in Dallas, even if it does come with a few extra headaches.
And those headaches, again, still translating into money for a team that, Dave, I want to say we got about a minute left here, has some strong expectations going into this year. It's felt like a cliff between the Dak contract, Mike McCarthy, and a lame duck year. Can they maintain the standard they've had the last 3 seasons of those 12 wins a year?
12 wins is hard. And I think Mike McCarthy pointed that out yesterday at his press conference, basically saying, look, we got to be better in the playoffs, but let's not undersell how hard it is to win 12 games in the NFL. This team has managed to straddle the line between the expectation and the circus with playing well. I do think we've kind of lost the plot this offseason. They are not as good as they were last year, in my opinion. They are still a good football team. They've still got an all-pro quarterback who is planning on playing, even if he doesn't get a new deal. CD is now back in the fold. This young rookie class, the 2 rookies on the offensive line playing really well in the preseason. I still think this is a playoff caliber team. Unfortunately for them, they are going to be judged by what happens in January. So they got to get there first. And even if it is true that winning 12 wins is hard to do, getting there, I don't think anybody really wants to hear it until they prove they're worth caring about in the postseason.
Completely agree. That is how they're going to be judged, but they at least get to walk into that conversation with the best receiver on their team back in form. Check out Dave. The NFL on Fox pod is awesome. Does a phenomenal job with that. Dave, always appreciate the time, brother. I'll talk to you soon, all right?
Anytime, fellas. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, it's annoying as hell on the outside, but to Dave's point, it always seems to get done.
And it's like the players expect it now. So they know they're going to be in for a little bit of a fight when all the leaves finally fall, according to Jerry.
Always easy to say you expect it, always hard when it's you.
Yeah.
right, guys, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and more. If you miss any of our great guests, and thank you to Ashley Bastock from Cleveland.com covering the Browns, and David Helman, host of the NFL on Fox podcast, for stopping by to talk about the Cowboys. If you missed either of those conversations, make sure you check them out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Dad, let's start with this. It is cut down day in the NFL.
Yes.
Now, this has changed a lot over the years as the preseason has changed shape. There are only 3 games now, and there's only 1 cut now.
Right.
So the roster goes from the 90-person expanded offseason rosters down to the 53-man roster for the active roster, plus the practice squad after that, all by 4 p.m. today. It's a tough day. Listen, for people that have lived through that, myself on the wrong side for the entirety of it. I went through camp 3 times. I got cut 3 times as a player who was told no. There are going to be a lot of guys who are told their dream is over today, and that is tough. It doesn't devalue the experience you had, making it to a place that very few have along the way, but everyone's got a different story along the way in getting to that point, including you.
Yeah, and when I played, we didn't have a 90-man roster. We had like 120 guys in camp, so there was a lot more names cut, but there were stages of the cut till you got to the final cut of 53. And now rookie year, I didn't have to worry about getting cut because I broke my ankle in training camp, so I was on IR for the entire year. But I was a 10th round draft pick by the Houston Oilers. So my second year, I had just not played my first year, coming in as a 10th rounder off IR. You know, there wasn't like, yeah, you're on the team. You know, I kind of had to bust ass to make it. And I thought I was having a good camp, but you know, you're just not sure where it's going to go with the coaches. But my late father-in-law, Ken Hansen, God rest his soul, he called the Oilers office, talked to a secretary, and acted like a reporter and said he had a deadline of when he had to have a story, that he wouldn't publish the story but needed the story ready to go with all the cuts. And somehow, some way, the secretary gave him the cut list. So before the cut list and guys actually got cut, he called me and he said, "You made the team." And I'm like, dude, come on. I'm like, you're being a nice father-in-law.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you made the team, think positive. He's like, no.
Oh, no, espionage.
He's like, no. You made the team. This is what I did. I called, I acted like a reporter. I know all the guys that are getting cut, that I acted like I'm putting an article out that I was going to wait until, but I had to hit send then right away. He goes, "You made the team." And I still didn't believe it until I didn't get the knock on the door.
Yeah.
You know, I still was hesitant to believe that he got the right information. But my father-in-law called, got the actual cut list before the cuts became public, and told me I had made the team.
It really is remarkable. My late grandfather, capable of a lot in that regard. At some point, I'll tell the story about how he spent 6 months conning me into believing that I was going to end up joining the priesthood. After having my name put into a pool for that by my Sunday school teacher as a kid. That man loved a good bit. And in this case, his bit was playing a reporter.
And he pulled it off incredibly well. I wish I would have believed him right out of the gate, but I'm sure you're going to believe that story, right?
My grandfather's also someone you don't want to believe right away. When it came
I'm
to
thinking,
these
wait,
things,
man, how are you messing? You can't be messing with me with something like this, with my job on the line. And sure enough, he had the cut list. He was absolutely right.
It was absolutely incredible. So we'll see if anyone else gets the news that way today. And again,
should we try that? Should we call someone? Just see if it works?
I feel like these processes might be a little bit more well-worn at this point. And obviously, there's a lot of rules about who the teams can bring back and how we can go over tomorrow.
There was no practice squad and bring it back and all that.
We'll go over all that tomorrow and get you caught up to speed on that. But Jesse, why don't we get to that? Some big news for the Red Sox and their broadcast booth.
Yeah, so yesterday the Red Sox had Portland Sea Dogs broadcasters Emma Tiedemann and Riley Pay call multiple innings of the game for Women's Equality Day. This was history, guys. 2 women doing color and play-by-play in the booth for multiple innings. You love to see it. Really cool stuff from the Red Sox.
Yeah,
that is very cool.
We've talked about this in a number of different instances. The Cubs did this earlier in this year with the booth that featured my buddy Taylor McGregor, who's done a great job over there at the Regional Sports Network covering those games. And so, Dad, it's just another reminder that there are so many great analysts doing work that aren't just the traditional roles that we've seen of man who was a former player for this team or for another team like this. There are plenty of people with valued and incredible perspectives that can offer a lot to the game.
And in one of the, I think, harder games to broadcast because there's so much time to fill. You know, I always thought that hockey would be the toughest for a play-by-play guy, but they're like, yeah, you just get the names down, the numbers down, and you kind of go. You're in a flow. But baseball, there's so much downtime that you just have to fill. You got to fill. So kudos to them for sure.
Yeah, and I think it twofold also just giving time to the people in your organization that are a part of it. Much like the same way we talk about the farm systems in these baseball programs, you got people calling minor league games with the hopes of one day being big-time broadcasters at this level. So to give them reps at this level and for it to be two women who are going out here cutting their teeth, working in this industry, awesome stuff by them. Very cool move by the Red Sox, and we're happy to see it here. Jesse, let's get to the third. Adam Sandler.
It's really important. So Adam Sandler is sort of infamous for like randomly showing up in pickup games in New York City or what have you. He just will be playing pickup basketball and people are like, is that Adam Sandler? Yes, it is. Well, a TikToker ran into him and had some questions for him about his wardrobe.
Underwear is kind of similar too.
Okay. Who I'm here with and where you from?
My name is Adam, Brooklyn.
Adam always got that drip.
It just happens. I didn't really think it through. There's sneakers. There's some goofy shorts.
Okay.
There's I wear this to cover this, and then I got this to cover more.
So he's kind of as infamous as he is for showing up on the basketball court. He's as infamous for his style, which is erratic,
relaxed.
Yeah, I've seen him show up to movie premieres in like a hoodie.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Hey. More power to him because he got known for that.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to get dressed up. He doesn't have to put the fancy suit on. He's known for dressing down. Kudos to him. I think he played the long game there and he won.
Okay, I have a hot take on this. And maybe it's not so hot. I don't know. I get it. It's part of his brand, and he doesn't have to show up in a suit to a premiere.
Yes.
But if you're going to a movie premiere, like, there's a happy medium. He could wear some dark wash jeans and a button down. Like, you know what I mean?
He probably could, Jesse, but to Dad's point, he has created this environment for himself where he lowered the expectation on this so long ago.
The bar is on the floor.
It is. The bar is on the floor.
Yes.
But, Jesse, if we told you could create that environment where you'd never have to come in here and dress up a day in your life to do the show, which I guess we already really... we kind of have done this to an extent. The fact that I have a collar on my shirt is a minor miracle today.
I am dressed up. I'm wearing jeans.
That is
a real pants.
But I mean, he doesn't even get talked about at least a lot by a lot negatively. It's just like, oh, that's just Adam. That's the way he dresses.
But it's like,
there's no expectation.
He's on the red carpet with Jennifer Aniston, who's wearing like YSL, and he's next to her in his button down.
You know, all the guys that are walking on that red carpet are like, damn. I wish I could be wearing that.
Well, some people like getting dressed up. Like some people like putting on the suit and feeling important and clean. I'm with you, but I'm saying for some people, that is what they like. I also understand the patriarchy is involved in here.
The freaking patriarchy.
There we
Strikes
go.
again.
Men. But no, I would agree.
Men.
I think overall for this, Adam Sandler continues to live up. And by all accounts, like, really good dude, someone that everyone seems to like. And so the fact that he doesn't want to dress up for these things becomes endearing. Honestly, great bit. Again, we've talked a lot about bits on this show. Works pretty well. He's got a new Netflix special coming out right now. Love You, his new stand-up special that's there. So
he signed the $100 million deal with Netflix. I mean, I'm telling you, more guys would love to be in his shoes. Not even money-wise, but obviously, money-wise.
Sure.
That's a given. But to dress down the way he does and never have to worry about dressing up.
Yeah, okay.
It's a vibe. It's a vibe that I subscribe to and that I should try and live publicly more often. We hope you download, subscribe, rate, and review our vibe. Leave it a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.